Hi everyone, welcome to TriEssence martial art channel. Today we're going to talk about what Newton said about arm punches. So this will be a follow-up video to my previous video about the Fajin fallacy, right? We're going to talk further on the concept of Fajin. So obviously, what did Newton say about arm puncher? Nothing, right? Because he wasn't a martial artist and he wasn't interested in martial art. So obviously he didn't say anything about punching people. However, what he did leave us is the three principles of motion. And those principles, even to this day, despite later people discover relativity and quantum mechanics, still governs how motion works, at least on planet Earth, right? So if you're on planet Earth, living in this universe, you are still governed by the three laws of motion. Today we are more interested in the third law of motion, which is when there's an action, there's the opposite reaction. Now what does that have to do with martial art, and more particularly Fajin, or even more specifically arm puncher, right? Because in Chinese martial arts, especially internal styles, arm puncher is a derogatory term, right? When we say somebody is an arm puncher, it means that he's not doing it correctly. And this whole context remains within the internal Chinese martial art. So how external martial art do they thing is irrelevant to what I'm talking about today. I'm only talking about internal Chinese martial art. So I'm not saying that external martial art is wrong to punch with the arms, not at all, but internal martial art, for us, arm punching is very bad. A couple of months ago, I called out some famous, internal master in the community, famous inverted commas, who basically demonstrate the quality of arm punching, and I called out on that, and his fans got really upset, right? The whole beef and drama happening, and then at that point, it struck me that a lot of people actually don't understand what is a good Fajin, which is why I made a previous video of the Fajin fallacy, where I talk about how if you are looking very intimidating and hard on your Fajin, then necessarily means that Fajin is good. Okay, today we're going to go further on that concept and notion and talk about why having power on your arm or the arm punching is bad. So according to Newton, when there's a force, the opposite reaction, right? So assuming that he is a wall, right? A solid piece of wall. If you are striking, obviously striking a wall will hurt your hand, but let's assume that is not the case. You can wear gloves or have some padding, it doesn't matter. When you are striking that wall, that force will come back to you. So if this concept is not clear to you, find a wall and at least try to hit with your hand. Don't hit with your fist. If you have a boxing glove, you can try hitting with your fist. If not, use your hand. And then examine to yourself, where do you feel the pressure of the reactive force? And a lot of time, especially if you are probably punching harder on your arms, this motion, you'll find that the reactive force will happen on your arm. And at the same time, you actually almost feel like your body getting pushed back if you push or hit hard enough against a solid object. What that means is that when your arm is applying force, right? Let's assume it's the elbow and the forearm and the wrist, this piece of body that is applying the most force, at the same time it's pushing against the wall or Eric here, his rebound force, together with the motion of my arm, is also pushing me back. The force happens on both sides. And now, why is that a problem? It's a problem when you are hitting something that has a sufficient amount of body mass, aka weight. Because then that force often will either hurt your joints or take you out of alignment and balance. Okay, if you don't believe me, again, go to a wall, either padded, but although padding will kind of absorb the impact, so it's not that accurate, or wear a glove, or just use your hand and see, right? If you hit the wall and your wrist feels sore, or your elbow feels tense, or you feel tension on the arm overall, then that means you are using this part to hit, and therefore the force is, it's almost like your force coming in, the wall's force coming back, it all cramps up at this part, and if you're trying to extend your arm, it will push yourself back. And in internal martial arts, we don't actually want that, because that is bad, or it's not efficient when it comes to power generation. Now, not that people are gonna then say, what about boxing, right? In boxing, you they talk about kinetic linking, but you push your leg, you turn your hip, you rotate your body, and then you throw out the hand. So even though you are punching with your whole body, but in the end, it's the arm that moves, that extends that last moment, or like that final thrusting. Okay, so what about that? So firstly, boxing is actually a very complex matter. Different famous boxers throughout the age punches differently. For example, Tyson, a lot of time, not always, but a lot of time when he punches, his arm doesn't extend. Right? He's actually using the body, and the punch kind of gets, the arm gets fixed, and the body delivers the punch, while the arm is relatively inactive. Compared to, for example, Ali, where his arm he actually extends his arm a lot more. So there are actually different ways in boxing. It's not just one set way to punch. Another thing that you have to keep in mind is that most of the punches in boxing is aimed at the head. Okay, so this isn't a problem when you're punching something that is lighter. Okay, a head is not gonna have enough force to push my arm back. So when I do a hook or a cross or even a jab, a head is gonna bounce back instead of my arm, which is why it's not really an issue, right? There's not enough reactive force to cause problem to your own arm or your own balancing. The problem comes in when you're hitting the body. So if you're only gonna hit the head, you don't really care about proper alignment and body structure, all the internal quality stuff. Okay, so if that's what you want to do, this thing is not really an issue for you. But in internal martial arts, a lot of the strikes are actually aimed for the body and not for the head. And there are many reasons for that, right? For example, the head, a lot of times is harder to catch. And also, right, in Chinese martial art, back in the days context, people all have more elongated stance, whether it's like the Bruce Lee stance or some other stance. Then it's harder to reach the head when the hands are kind of in the way. Another thing is, a lot of time in my previous video we talked about in Chinese martial art, internal martial art specifically, we try to sucker punch people. So we don't bring out our hand here and do a punch, our hand start from here. And from here to hit the head is a lot slow compared to hitting the body. And also a lot of times, someone else is throwing a punch at me, and then at this moment, then punching the body would be ideal. So there are many reasons why in Chinese martial arts, you would opt to punch the body instead of the head. Now, I'm not saying the head punching is bad, right? I personally prefer head punching if it's possible. If I can't get something on the head, by all means, hit him on the head. But what if you can't? You have to hit him on the body. And that's where the problem comes in. If you hit on the body, arm punching is very bad. Not only will, like, give us a stun, right? So not only will it push yourself back, right? If you hit hard, you'll push yourself back. I'm exaggerating, but punch a wall or do something to a wall, you will see. Another thing is that it also gives you a lot of pressure on your wrist and on your elbow, and sometimes might even cause injuries. And most importantly, it is ineffective. Right? Again, over here people are gonna say, what about famous boxers who does body shot like Tyson, right? He's famous for doing body shot and then sometimes even KOing the opponent. So firstly, they're heavyweight, right? Due to the square cube law. Don't know what that is, you can Google it. Once you reach heavyweight, like 90 plus, 100 kilo and 110 kilo, then you create much more force than someone who weighs 75, 65, or even 55. So for them, there's just much more power exponentially that they can generate from a punch, and the amount of punishment the body can receive doesn't increase as much as the power they're generating. Which is why if you weigh that much, again, you don't have to concern about this, right? If you weigh 100 kilo, frankly, you don't even need to do martial art. You can just slap most of the people who are not the same weight category as you and win. Right? That's not the issue here. The issue is when you are like 65 to 75, like us, and then obviously if I'm punching Eric, it's not that much of a deal either, because he's slightly lighter than me. But if I'm punching something that's like 85, then punching the body incorrectly would be very, very bad, right? It will hurt my hand, hurt my arm, it will push myself back, and most importantly, it doesn't hurt the other person. And which is why in internal martial art, we have very important understanding on how to hit the body more efficiently. So the traditional concept of punching with your arm, even if I'm moving in my body and then at the last moment launching the arm out, if it has enough sufficient amount of inertia and weight and resistance, the rebound force will then push back onto my arm, and because that I'm launching it, the last rotation from my shoulder, it will come back, like push against me, right? you'll come back into the shoulder, right? I'm exaggerating, but it comes out something like this. And that, if you're in a bad angle and unlucky, it might actually hurt your shoulder. And even if not, a lot of the force is getting bounced back into this joint. So this joint becomes the part where two opposing forces meet rather than here. Right? Which is also why you might already know this, that in a lot of combat sport, and in Chinese martial arts as well, they teach you that when somebody throws a punch at you, you move forward into the punch. Right? Instead of moving, obviously you can move back and evade, but if I stand here and I take the hit, right to the body, it's hurt a lot more. But if he throws a punch and I move into the punch, you kind of smash the punch, and it can actually hurt his shoulder, wrist, or wherever.
Most of the shoulder.
Yeah, so that is why they teach you to move in, because then you actually are applying pressure into the guy's arm, and if he's not punching with unified structure, there's a big chance that you're gonna push his force back and hurt himself. So then how are you supposed to punch in internal martial arts concept and not be qualified as an arm puncher? I've actually talked about this in a much older video on the physics behind internal. It's basically quite a simple thing, right? But it just seems that maybe back then I didn't explain this as clear as I would like to. I'm going to give another jab at it. So basically, you might imagine your arm like a stick. It doesn't move, right? Stick is a solid object. Instead, the body is what hammers the stick into the person. So instead of rotating my body and then launching the hand and find the final stage of the strike happening from here, I'm sort of having my arm here and my body is launched into it. Obviously there's still slight adjustment to the elbows, the wrist and everything to accelerate the force, but the idea is that the arm is not what we are actively using. The arm is sort of passive compared to the rest of the body. And you can again try this, although if you haven't trained it, it might be difficult. Go to a wall and then try to basically stand with a wider stance.
Yeah.
Try to firstly push with your arms being the active engagement, like push against me, and then see how that feels. And then keep your arm here, then try to push it with your body and see how that feels. Right? Against the wall, you will not immediately feel that when you push it with your body and keep your arm fixed but not active, you feel that you have much better support and balance. And if you're putting in a person, the difference will be that if I'm pushing with my arm, or against someone pushing against me, then all the time I can push myself back. Because force goes both ways, like Newton keeps saying. When I'm doing this, and I'm actually also, not only am I pushing him this way, I'm also pushing myself backwards. But if I keep this thing relatively inactive, put against me, and I'm using my body to push forward, then it just absorbs the reactive force a lot better. So from that kind of slow experiment, you should be able to understand what I mean by arm punching, or the correct structure, which is punching with your body. And obviously, pushing not exactly the same as punching. But the difference here is mostly determined on surface of contact, how sudden the motion is, and the impulse, right? How long, what kind of period are you applying that force over? The shorter it is, the more of a strike it is. The longer you apply the period, the more it becomes a push. But the fundamental concept of using your arm or using your body would be the same. With that said, there is a big difference between pushing and punching, right? Besides the amount of time it takes for you to deliver the force, also the result you're expecting. If I'm pushing someone, I'm expecting him to be displaced, to fall backwards. When punching someone, I'm actually not expecting him to move back. Obviously, for demonstration purpose, you can use a punch and show displacement force and causing the person to move back. Nothing wrong with that. But don't confuse that with a practical punch, right? So a practical punch, so for example, if someone does a practical punch and the guy didn't take 3 steps back, it doesn't mean the punch is ineffective. What we want in a practical punch, and I've talked about in my previous videos already, is damage. And damage means that his body can't move back. Okay, I want his body to stay where it is, and only a small surface I'm contacting is being pushed in. Now think about this as an analogy, right? If I have a needle and I have a very tiny piece of object, if I try to push that object with a needle, what will happen is that the object will be pushed back by the needle. The needle will not be able to penetrate the object unless I hold it in place and I go against it like that. If I just leave it here and I put it with needles, the object will move back. But that's almost like pushing, right? And that's really fun with the head, because with the head, we want the head to move. Because the fact that the head moves is what causes concussion, right? The head displays, the brain inside it knocks on the skull, and then people get a concussion. That's what you want. So that's why the way boxing and other external martial arts, when they hit the head, is perfectly fine. If the head is all you are hitting, you can rotate, and then launch the fist, and then knock somebody else, perfectly fine. But the body is slightly different, right? Because it's heavier, the rebound force, the reactive force is a lot more. As I keep saying, by hitting it like that, it will cause the rebound force to act on your own joint. However, if I take a needle and I try to push Eric, I will not be able to push him back, right? What will happen is I'll stab him. Yeah. And why is that? Because the force is acting on a much smaller surface, so the rest of the body is not being displaced to dissipate the force being applied. Now obviously this is a very extreme example. Your hand cannot become a needle. Your fist is the same size, whether you want to push or whether you want to punch, obviously. But how we do accomplish slightly towards that objective is basically by not actively delivering the arm forward, right? So if I want to, for example, do a pushing arm kind of punch, it will be something like this, okay? And a lot of times you see that in the demo, you'll be impressed if you're unaware, or if you're not knowledgeable. You think, wow, that's a powerful punch, right? The guy walks up to me and boom, and the guy flies back. That's really good. Obviously, I keep saying that only to show you displacement power is fine, but you have to make clear that that's not how you want to punch somebody when you are engaging in a fight. Because what happens is now you don't feel any pressure on your body, right?
No, not so at all.
Not so at all. And why? Because when the body is displacing, it's dissipating all the power that I'm generating. I'm moving his whole body back together. So what I do want is for the force to go into him, and for the rest of the inertia to work against that force, so that only a small surface is being pushed in, and that's when the power penetrates. And to do that, you have to limit the amount of arm force you have, and how much force your arm is actually pushing against. So firstly, if your arm push a lot, it's almost impossible to generate penetration power, right? If you are starting from here and push your arm out, then chances are this will be a displacement force. And secondly, if your arm are tense, then again, it will be a displacement force. You have to use your arm like a medium, a stick, and hammer it with your body. The hand, the fist, should not actively try to push something back. Rather, it's just there so that whatever creates on my body using body mechanic get transferred here and then passing into the person. And that's how you create a punch that penetrates. On the surface, it might not look like anything at all, but the person will feel the pressure getting stuck inside his body. A good example of this are the Yiquan puncher, right? I mean, my Yiquan punch is not good at all. So if you want to see a good Yiquan punch, look at the Yao brothers, look at Da Cui, and those people from that generation. But just to give you a rough idea, right, a displacement punch, as I showed, is like that. But what I want is actually this. Okay, what difference is that from the previous one?
Yeah, knock the air out.
But you see, the body doesn't move back. I mean, it does kind of move a little bit, but you see, there's not a lot of kinetic energy. Or rather, shall I say that the force I generate didn't get transferred into kinetic energy. It got transferred into something else, pressure, which then sits in the body. And that's what kind of punch you want. And you see, when I'm doing that punch, I'm not actively doing much with the arm. It's here, and I'm just using my body to then launch the hand. I mean, the hand does something, but it's not a lot. Okay, and if I do this punch without, in the air, it will look like this. And you can see that the arm is very inactive compared to someone who does, like that, or right? You can see, hopefully you can see the difference. I know for some of you who hasn't trained long enough, it's very hard to tell, but I hope that gradually you can see the difference between actively what we call arm punching versus when your arm is just here, but your body is punching. Right? To the uninitiated, this might look like a weaker punch. But if you actually feel the punch, it will hurt a lot more. And especially this punch, right? The mid punch is a very good example because if you do a mid punch and you punch with your arm, it's actually very easy to hurt your arm because of the angle that your arm is at, and your wrist, punching like this is far easier than punching like this in terms of stress on your wrist, right? Over here it's easy to align. Over here, you kind of, if you turn your body slightly off, it creates the wrong pressure to your wrist, and also given the angle of the punch, right over here you have the entire structure of the shoulders, so easy to push against. If I want to do this and try to push somebody, it's a lot harder. Which is why you do a mid punch, but using your arm punching, right here, it will just not be very ideal, right? He kind of moves back, but I also feel the pressure bouncing into my own body and makes my arm slightly uncomfortable. Of course, if you do a lot of conditioning, knuckle push-up and stuff, it will alleviate this kind of stress. But again, that's for external martial art, and we are today talking about internal martial art. So instead, when I'm doing a mid punch, what I'm doing is that I'm not trying to push him back. I'm not trying to accelerate my fist through distance. What I'm doing is I'm connecting the fist, I'm feeling his resistance, and his resistance is going to bounce back to me and align my own body, and then my mechanic then compresses and hit him. So I'm not actively pushing this. Instead, I'm touching him, and then my body falls into structure the moment I feel there's a rebound force, and then the power happens. So it looks something more like this. Right, so okay, do the first one again. So otherwise, when you propel your arm forward. So what difference do you feel?
So the second one, not the last one. Not the last one, the one before that one. Yeah. That one feels a lot. I can feel a lot more behind the pad.
Behind the pad.
Yeah.
Okay.
Where's the others? Right. It's just. I don't know.
You get pushed back.
Yeah. I don't feel. I don't. Well, first of all, I don't feel pain.
Mm-hmm.
I just feel like I got pushed back, and there's no feeling between the pad and me.
Okay.
For the pushing. It's just that it's not as if this, I pushed back, I got pushed back along with the pad.
Yeah.
Whereas the second one, right? It's not pushed back as per se, and I feel it, and I feel sore, even if it is behind the pad.
Yeah.
That's what it is.
So that's the thing, right? But the punch itself would look not as impressive, right? Because you're not propelling the arm forward, you're not doing a motion, and and the guy's not falling backwards. Instead, it just kind of looks like just doing that, like not much happened. But you see, this is actually what internal martial art want, right? There's a very famous saying called "形不破体，力不出肩." Right? 形不破体 means the shape does not break out of the structural body. 力不出肩 means the force does not have an angle. So a lot of people, they kind of misunderstand this into thinking that it's about Tai Chi, everything has to be round. No matter what you do, it's always round. That's actually not true, because in Tai Chi, you have the famous Ban Lan Chui. Nothing wrong about it, right? It's not like this. So there's no time where in Tai Chi or in other internal martial arts that you have to punch out of the circle and be an angle. So what does it actually mean by 力不出肩, your force does not have an angle? It actually means that no part of your body travels on its own out of the structure. So even though I'm punching in an angular triangle kind of shape, but my whole body is working as a whole. It's not like a rocket where it comes out and each part propels the further part forward, and in the end the first then gets speed up like a bullet and then run into the person. That's not how it is. When that happens, then that first becomes 出肩, right? The part that extends from the structure, and that part receives a lot of rebound force, and that's where it's potentially you get injured from. Instead, the force doesn't seem to come out of the body. It happens it's not circular in shape, but it's circular in concept. It's very hard to explain this, but if you look at the motion, I'm going to do it exaggerated again. The one is your arm travels forward and actively punching. Other one is your arm sort of it's just there. It doesn't go out. So that when I'm punching him, the force is not actively pushing him, but it's just there. And that's what creates the penetration of force onto the person. Anything you want to add on this?
Yeah, it's kind of Tai Chi is a very cryptic language to me, to be honest.
Yes.
When they say Rang, they don't mean Rang.
Yes.
They mean complete, not cut off. That's what when they say Rang. Rang means completeness. It's a very symbolic symbolism. I think that's what I'm saying. That when they say Rang, you don't actually be around.
So you have to punch like this.
It means completeness. So and it means encirclement, inclusion. That's what it means.
Yeah, so when I'm doing this punch, whether it is mid punch or ban chui, my whole body is working together. I'm not
complete.
Yes, it's
your hand don't just come from.
Yeah, it's not a 1, 2, 3, 4. Right. That's not what it is. The whole body doing it as a whole.
Yeah, including your hand. So that's how I see it.
And that's the best way to handle against rebound force, right? I mean, actually, this time you can also take one of those heavy the dummies that some of the gyms have. If you hit really hard, you can also feel how the pressure will come down and crash on your hand. Obviously, again, if you do a lot of knuckle push-up and stuff, it mitigates that. But that is making your limb stronger. It doesn't mean that the rebound force is not happening. Okay. Whereas this approach, it lessens the amount of rebound force because the fact that I'm not actually pushing with my arm, I'm instead of using my body, the rebound force comes back to the body. Because this is just the medium, right? If I'm taking a stick, I'm putting it on him, and I'm hammering into him, then the rebound force comes through the stick. The stick is only a medium. It doesn't act on its own. The stick is not pushing against him, so the stick is not getting pushed back. So that's the concept that we want. And obviously this we're talking about is striking and causing penetration damage, right? Even with sending or the displacement force, the sensing applies. Okay. So obviously, the most easy way to displace somebody or send someone is to push with your arms, because if I step in and then I push him with my arm, then I create a lot more momentum, and my body traveling a longer distance, and therefore causing him to move back further. That's a very easy way to achieve this result. The problem to that is, if he's actively pushing against me, so I'm going to do that and just push against me. You see, you actually end up pushing yourself back. Obviously, if you're stronger, heavier, etc., you overcome that, that headbutting, like boost, and you'll still be able to push it back. But that's only when you are stronger and heavier. And and if you're stronger and heavier than everyone else, you don't really need that much training. You can beat most people, right? So that's not what we're trying to practice or understand in internal martial art. What we want to do is understand how, if we have similar body, similar strengths, or even if I'm inferior by a bit, right? It can't be by a lot, but if I'm inferior by a bit, how I can overcome that disadvantage? And again, that I can't actively push with my arm, because when pushing with my arm, at the same time I'm pushing myself back. So whoever is heavier is going to win. If he's heavier, even though I'm the active pusher, I'm going to push myself back. So instead, I have to push him, absorb his rebound force in the rest of the body, and then use that to displace him. Which is very similar in essence to the punch. Only difference is the punch is meant to hurt, this is meant to displace. So if I'm going to do more in line with the arm pushing, right, it will look something like this. So I step in and I'll push him out, which is fun, right? If you're stronger, that works. The other way, just try to see the difference, right? When I'm trying to use my structure and not the hand. What difference do you feel on the two different types of approach?
It's just more subtle, I guess.
More subtle.
It's harder to resist the second.
The reason that is because when you're trying to push with your arm, you're always going to take more time. Because you have to engage, load up, and then push through this whole distance. And throughout that whole distance is how you create the kinetic energy. But at the same time, it also makes things more time to react. Whereas the other one, in Chinese we call it 一触即发. The moment you touch, the force is issued. So I'm not pushing him, but I'm just like, it's almost like a force transfer that bounces him back. By bouncing, I don't mean like bouncing, but just like bouncing a ball. You tap the ball and the ball goes out. That's why it is more subtle.
but nonetheless, I mean, obviously, the second one happens so suddenly. Obviously, there will be some sort of fuse difference on my chest. But I think the bottom line is that it's a lot harder to resist, and the most important part is a lot harder to react and to react to resist basically. So I guess that's why it's sometimes you'll find that pushing doesn't really make the guy fly backwards that much as a structural push. It's simply because it's not that the structural push is stronger, it's the guy couldn't react soon enough.
Yes, you have to know that when he's falling back a few meters, it is not my force making him move back. It's just simply that moment I told him to about this angle, gravity does the rest of the work. In order to not fall, he's going to have to backpedal, and that's what creates the distance. It's not my force. It's like if you put a sack of potato here, well, that's not a good idea. Right? Let's say I have a block that weighs the same as Eric, and I do this push, it will not go as far back. Yeah. Okay, so that distance is not from the power. The power happens. It's more about how sudden I can unbalance him, and how much unbalance I can create. If I unbalance him severely enough, he will literally just fall on his back. And if I unbalance him not that much, he will keep backpedaling. And if the force isn't sufficient at all, he'll just take one step back and recover. So that's something you also need to understand. But the point of this video is basically to show you that it is not the arm that pushes, but rather the arm connects, and then when I feel his force against me, it basically put myself into a kind of structure, and at the same moment I'm stepping in, his force kind of rebounds into my body, and then at the same time both forces kind of collide, and that's how I'm able to do this without moving the hand a lot, in order to still create that kind of displacement. And that in essence is the same as a punch, except that over here I'm still aiming to displace, whereas if you use a punch, you see my arm is also not doing this, but the whole body rebound, it just kind of then shocks into. So that is why arm punching is bad, and that is why whenever I see someone who does internal style that has a very forceful strike on the hand, and I by default think it is bad. And what this means is that a lot of the good martial art practitioners, when doing the power generation of Fai Jin, it doesn't look nearly as impressive as those that are actually not good. And this is very counterintuitive, but that's just the way it is. Because the good ones, most of the time you will see that the arm is relatively inactive, right? So they will have very solid structure to be very well coordinated, but it's not, obviously I'm imitating, so it's not the best example, but you can see that they are solid, but they are not exaggerated.
Same time, 脚到手到。
They're not like that. And when I see something in that line, personally I think that is pretty bad. And this will basically explain to you why arm punching is bad and why you have to use the arm as inactive medium and punch with your body. I'll also be making a part 2 video for my Patreon supporters exclusive, where I will go more into detail the difference between displacement force and the damaging force, how those are different, how they are generated, how they are mechanically different. So basically that, how to choose between generating this one or that one. So if you're interested in that, then do consider subscribing to my Patreon support channel. Yes, and obviously in case you're wondering, I can't displace Eric a lot further, but there's a ledge there, so can't actually do that. So this is just a very basic example to show the principle. It's not to show maximum power generation, right? In case of some of you wondering, why he isn't flying off the balcony, it's because I still need him for other stuff. Alright, that's it for today. Hope the video has made sense to you. I hope that has been interesting. And if it has, then please subscribe on my YouTube channel. If you can support me on Patreon, that would be greatly appreciated. I have a lot of Patreon exclusive video. We're going to detailed explanation on the 4 fundamental forces of internal, as well as various other topics that will help you better understand how to train internal martial art. But as I keep saying that I can't teach you internal martial art, but I can show you the mechanics and explain them to you, so that should you meet the correct teacher, or if you should meet the teacher, you are armed with the knowledge to tell if he's legit or not, and not waste your time training the wrong thing for years and years.
As always, a shout out to all my Patreon supporters. Thank you guys so much for supporting me, especially through this pandemic. A special welcome to my new Patreon supporters, Colin Hugh and Eric Frosthinder. Welcome to my Patreon family, and I hope you enjoy your stay here and find my videos interesting and informative. As always free to message me when you have any questions on current content or suggestions for future content.
Lastly, I'd like to remind everyone we're still in the pandemic. Get vaccinated, mask, sanitation, social distancing if you can. Stay safe, stay healthy. Thanks for watching TriEssence Martial channel, and I'll see you next time.